This call is being recorded.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Digimentors briefing. We use this opportunity to talk about events, topics, tools, platforms in the news that we all need to get better acquainted with, to deep dive, to get a deep dive into some of these topics. And today we're going to be talking about all the new hardware that's coming out in the digital space, and everyone from Google, Amazon, and Apple, of course, plus Facebook now have announced in the last few weeks major new tools and gadgets. And so we're turning to our resident gadget guru, Andrew Lee, who is going to help us try and understand what's going on. And Andrew is on Twitter at Fuzzheado, F-U-Z-H-E-A-D-O. And please do follow him there. And I'm sreenivasan at sree on Twitter. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, good being with you.
Thanks for doing this. We're doing this, of course, as a special for our Digimentors members. And we will release, we'll give them a chance first to ask questions and such, but we'll perhaps put this online later for other folks to have access to the information as well. But first, we want to say hello and thank you to our Digimentors members who are supporting our business as we get started in trying to continue what we're doing, which is helping people understand technology. And you've done that for me for years when we were starting out at Columbia together, and
Right.
Now you teach around the world. So let's get your kind of opening thoughts on the question at hand, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, just to expand on what you're saying, the funny thing about the landscape now is that there's no lack of opinions about the technology and how it impacts society, right? If you look at YouTube, podcasts, websites, you probably have more reviews and more opinions than ever before, yet I think people feel like they still don't know exactly how to interpret all these things, right? And the value that we bring as Digimentors, as a community, and what we bring is curating what we think are the highest signal and the most significant trends for folks in our circles. So these would be either digital professionals or folks just trying to figure out what they should be paying attention to in this digital space. So I think the announcements of the last few weeks have been really interesting because they've come fast and furious, and they pretty much boiled down to the big four at this point, right? So Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple. These are the four that are pretty much dominating the landscape. And for the last week or two, it's been the home and the hearth that has been that battlefield. So I thought we could maybe march down some of the things that were announced by Google, Facebook, Amazon. And then a few weeks ago, Apple had its own announcement too, and try to contextualize all that for our folks here.
Just to say that when you and I started in this business, digital things were all digital and there were no hardware involved in any of it. It was all software plays.
Right.
And
right.
Look how the world has changed. It was only Microsoft and Apple were the two players. There were, of course, Dell and other things, but now the landscape is so different. And to even think that we have something like Facebook with its first public physical product straight to consumer is so interesting. Right. When I was at the Met as Chief Digital Officer, we worked with them on their first physical product ever, which is called a Facebook Beacon. These were little gadgets that they would put around the museum so that people could connect with their Facebook in better ways. But apart from that, this is the first time that they're doing something directly to consumer. So we'll let you start where you'd like to go, and then we'll follow you on the different topics.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned the beacons part, because Apple actually, around that same time, tried that same thing, right? Which is that you had a really nice GPS system in your phone, but once you went indoors and start to go to galleries and rooms, the GPS is no good, right? You need to be outdoors, even, seeing the sky to use GPS. So a lot of companies tried the beacon approach, like could you get down to 1 meter or sub 1 meter accuracy? And I don't think it really worked out well for Apple or Facebook, but it was worth a shot. And that's probably in our future somewhere that we could get down to, 1 foot or 2 foot of resolution for interesting things to happen. But as you and I have done many times in our Digimentors meetups, it's pretty much now QR codes and Bluetooth that get you that kind of stuff. So yeah, let's start with Google, because I think Google's is kind of an interesting place to begin with, because they were the ones who announced probably the widest array of products. If you didn't see the Google announcement, they had this event in New York City, and they certainly don't do the keynote as good as Apple, but they're trying. So they announced 3 big products. Well, I'd say 2.5 big products. So they've had the Pixel, Pixel 2, Pixel cell phone out for a while. So they announced the Pixel 3, which is their kind of flagship phone, as they call it, the top of the line phone that tries to demonstrate all the things they would like to see push forward in this space. So the Pixel 3 is more of an evolution than a revolution. It's kind of like what Apple did with the iPhone XS. Their upgrades is just trying to give an upgrade to the existing kind of Pixel phone series. So the Pixel 3 is a phone that comes in 2 sizes. There's a 5.5 inch and a larger 6.something, maybe 6.3 inch. So it's kind of like the same as what Apple's done with the iPhone XS and XS Max. And they upgraded the camera. They are basically doing what Apple did as well, and saying that, you know what, a 12 megapixel camera is about as big as people need on a cell phone. And there really is no, I don't want to say room for improvement, but the hardware, we pretty much got that figured out. And now the real innovation for both Apple and Google, who have at their heart kind of photography and imaging and selfies as part of their main reason to exist, are doing things in the computational realm. So you might have heard of this trend called computational photography. It's that photography is no longer innovation in the hardware space. It's actually saying when you raise your phone to take a picture, the camera's already, or the camera, I should say, the iPhone or the phone is already doing a lot of stuff, right? So before you even hit the click button or the take picture button, it's actually capturing dozens and dozens of pictures before that. And when you hit the take picture button, it takes a whole series of pictures it captured and tries to do its magic, right? It tries to do high definition. It tries to figure out whether your eyes are open or closed. It tries to see what's the best scene. So Google showed this off saying, hey, when you hit that take picture button, we actually look at like a dozen or 20 pictures and we try to find the best one that's in there. So that's kind of the trend now with photography, is what we call computational photography. It's no longer just hit a button, snap one photo. It's hit a button, and the algorithm tries to determine what is the best thing that it can give you at that moment in time, which is pretty cool. So that's kind of the innovation we're seeing in photography. It's not the hardware, it's the software. Any questions, Sree?
Yeah, do you see that trend continuing? I mean, I love in the iPhone 8 and the 10, the 8 Plus and the 10, you've got already the portrait mode, and It looks like the newer features are even better. And so the question comes for any journalist listening is, what is acceptable about this kind of computational work being done? There are certainly people who object to this and will say to kind of put a photo illustration credit almost on this. What do you think of that?
Right. Well, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, it basically puts to complete end, I hope, the myth that there is a picture is the truth of what is there, and mucking around with it alters the truth in a bad way. There was never an objective truth photo of anything in the world. Every kind of photo alters reality in some way. So you might have heard of some of the controversies around the algorithms that are applied to these pictures. You know, there was for a brief moment called Beautygate. So people were saying that the selfies that came off of Apple's camera were looking a little softer and a little bit more almost like makeup-y, on the face. But that's part of the computational photography phenomenon, is when you snap like 15 pictures and try to create something that's the best version of what you just took, it's necessarily going to alter something depending on what you're used to seeing in real life. So it really was not a gate or a scandal. It's just that the expectation needs to be changed somewhat in that area. So similarly, you're going to see some flubs when you do computational photography, but I think on balance, the average person can be very happy with the fact that both Google and Apple are trying their best to say, hey, let me take a bunch of photos and give you the best version I can hand to you at the end of the day. And then another thing that's kind of interesting about Google is they haven't gone the route of Apple of putting in 2 cameras, 3 cameras, 4 cameras into the back of the phone. They still have one 12 megapixel camera, but when you try to zoom in on something and everyone's tried to use the digital zoom, and it looks really grainy and blocky. But what they're doing is they're saying that when you zoom in and your hand shakes and, they see the image vibrating a little bit in there, it's actually taking all those pictures that from the shake and trying to use all those things to make a higher resolution picture. And algorithmically, that's pretty sound approach, but no one's really done that, on this scale before. So if that works, because Pixel 3 just came out, it promises to be pretty cool that you don't need 2, 3, 4 lenses on your camera to get pretty high resolution pictures, right? So that's kind of the innovation of the Pixel 3 is one camera, lots of capability.
I'm sorry, you can hear our dog in there. Let me first of all see if anybody has a question with people listening on mute. If they'd like to say hello, they can just jump in here and say hi with a question. Otherwise, let's continue on the Google chain.
Sure. So the other thing that I think was the most interesting in terms of newness was a Pixel Slate. So Google had a tablet many generations ago, and it wasn't well received, and they've kind of stayed out of this space for a while. But they've had the Chrome OS that a lot of folks like Acer and other companies have made into really cheap laptops. So some of you have seen Chromebooks. I have a Chromebook. I think Sree has a Chromebook. They're really great for schools, like $120. Really nice. It just runs like the Chrome OS. It's a great browser experience. But now they have the Pixel Slate, which is kind of a competitor with the iPad Pro or the Microsoft Surface Pro. Really nice, high-density display, around 12 inches big. It has a pencil or a stylus. It has a keyboard you can snap onto it, and it runs Chrome OS. Not really Android per se. It can run some Android stuff, but it's kind of a weird new thing that Google's doing. But what's kind of neat is that's USB-C oriented, right? So it's got USB-C ports, and you can actually plug your Pixel Slate tablet into a 4K monitor, like a big 25, 28, 30-inch monitor, and actually have it replace your, full-fledged laptop or desktop computer. So this is actually kind of interesting now in that it's a full-blown, high-powered operating system on the Pixel Slate, and you could just basically have everything in one thing. Now, it's not cheap, so it's going to be like $599 at the starting point, and if you want the keyboard, it's $199, which I found just kind of ludicrous. If you want the pencil or the stylus, it's another $99. So once you start adding this stuff up, you're getting to like $900, $1,000 for a tablet with accessories. That's a little bit up there if you compare it to a tablet, but if you're comparing it to a laptop, it's actually pretty reasonable. So just really depends on whether this fits your needs as a device. But a lot of people these days go with an iPad Pro or a Surface Pro, and that's their only main computing device other than their mobile phone. So the Pixel Slate could be an interesting thing for certain folks who say, hey, I don't want to carry around a 15-inch laptop, and I don't want to carry around all the stuff. I just want a tablet with some accessories to it. So that's the Pixel Slate, and I thought it was a pretty neat device, but I'm not looking out for $1,000 tablet myself. So
let's talk about the Pixel phone and then move on from Google.
Well, the Pixel phone we talked about, but maybe you're talking about Home Hub. So the Home Hub is the last thing that Google announced. And anyone who's ever used the Google Home before, it kind of looks like a little can in the middle of your home. And Google's really never put a display on their Home Assistant products, right? So I use the Google Home quite a bit at home for music, weather. My kids love asking it questions like, "What's the evolution of Pokemon X?" And it knows what to say. So it's pretty cool. But there's never been a display. So this is basically like a tethered tablet. So Google Home Hub is like a Google Home with a screen. And what I think is interesting about this, because there's a lot of these things now, right? There's Amazon Alexa, Apple's got their speaker in the home, is that this thing is kind of, at least they announced it as multi-user capable, which is always my big beef with voice-activated assistants, right? It's this device sitting in the middle of your home, and then my requests get mixed up with my wife's requests, gets mixed up with my kids' requests, and it really can't optimize stuff for me because who knows who's logged in at one point in time. So it says that it can recognize the voices of who's asking it and kind of customize it based on who's talking, which I think is pretty cool. And if there's any company of all these four that could do it well, I think Google's the one. Not only is their tech better, but they actually, push the idea of an account per person with all these customizations. So I think that's kind of interesting if they can get it to work. The other really interesting thing about the Google Home Hub is they've intentionally put no camera into it. And when we talk about the Facebook portal, which is the complete opposite of this, not putting a camera in this thing, it seems retrograde, but it's actually kind of smart at the same time. They basically said, we don't want to be creepy with this whole privacy thing. So if they're trying to convince people to put this in their bedroom, leaving the camera off of it is probably the best decision they've ever made. So they said, we want to give you a display surface, but we don't really need to have this camera snooping in on you or even giving you the thought that we're snooping in on you. So that's kind of interesting. No camera, still voice, and a voice interface and a display on the screen. So those are the big three things: the Pixel 3 phone, the Pixel Slate as a new tablet product, and the Google Home Hub, which is a voice assistant with a screen to show stuff like maps and Google Photos and things like that.
I would just want to ask you about the comparison as we go into discussing the Amazon products, the difference between the Google Home and the Amazon Alexa, which I just said her name, and so she's now woken up.
Look what you did.
And so what is the, I feel like Alexa is more commercially successful at the moment,
right?
And also more commercially oriented, right? Like you can end up buying stuff very easily, and its lookup is very weak compared to Google,
right,
which of course is built on lookup because that's the company's DNA.
Right. For better or for worse, Google has more tentacles into your life than Amazon does, at least for most people, right? Google kind of knows where you're going if you use Google Maps. It kind of knows what you took pictures of if you use Google Photos. It knows your music taste, et cetera, et cetera. It knows your email. Those are things that Amazon doesn't have. But Amazon does have your purchasing history, and it kind of knows what you browse. And so if you're a serial shopper, then Amazon may know more about you than Google. But Google in general has the upper hand in terms of AI and what it can do for you. So, Sree, you are more of an Amazon Alexa user than I am. I've used it casually, but I don't have a device at home. I'm more of a Google Home person because I'm not that attracted to the idea of, Alexa, buy me 10 rolls of toilet paper. I just kind of have other ways to acquire my household goods than to speak to a disc on the counter. But that's kind of my bias. But Amazon has great product. The thing that kind of puzzles me about Amazon's approach is they announced so many products, and I think TechCrunch was the one that said 12 products at one launch. And, I still think that Amazon still has this philosophy, not necessarily of delighting the user with the whole experience, but just kind of a spray and pray, right? They've got so many Kindles, they've got so many Alexas, and they're basically saying there is a device for everyone out there. But sometimes there's this paradox of choice. People get analysis paralysis. Like I look at the list of Amazon products and I say, I don't know what to do. There's a disc, there's a dot. Now there's an Echo for your car. There's an Echo Sub, which is a big bassy subwoofer speaker. There is 3 or 4 Fire TV things, like kind of like an Apple TV / Roku that plugs into your HD TV. There's an Echo Show that's kind of a voice assistant with a screen. So that's kind of a direct competitor to the Google Home Hub. So, and then they've acquired Ring, right? The video doorbell as well. So they are definitely of the camp that we are going to give you so many choices. You will not be disappointed with any of them. But on the other hand, I don't know how to choose them. I just don't know. So you, Sree, you use Alexa more than I do. You use it every day pretty much. What is your feeling about Alexa's future, Amazon's direction?
I think you've summed it up really well, and they really do want you to buy stuff. I was trying to show someone how Amazon, the Alexa can help you buy like an Instant Pot, and I didn't actually mean to buy it, and it showed up in our house. So that wasn't
accidental order.
Yeah, I accidentally ordered it. Yeah, and we love the Instant Pot. It's the #1 thing sold on Amazon, and it's changed our lives. So it's great, but I didn't mean to order it. So this is kind of like, in a way, it's sort of the Apple thing, right? Where Steve Jobs made products you didn't know you wanted. Here, Alexa sends you products you don't know you wanted, but once you get them, you're happy in both cases. And just very quickly about Alexa, we'll say how it has changed our lives. And again, she woke up when I said it, is that we have replaced the clock radios in the kids' bedrooms with the $30 Alexa Dot. And what that has helped is that they're not, as teenagers, they're kind of obsessed with what time it is, and they would wake up in the middle of the night and look at the time and not be able to go back to sleep, all of that stuff. They now are sleeping much better because they just say to Alexa, wake me up at 3 o'clock, at 6 o'clock or 6:30, whatever, and it just works. So and now, of course, the alarm has been set in all our bedrooms by my talking about it. So that's kind of little practical things, but I like the idea of not having a screen on the Alexa, not having a camera. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes with that. So let's pause here and see if anyone who's listening has a question, particularly about Alexa, the Alexa suite of products.
Anything
And
Google, anything Alexa, or any?
Yeah. So far, anything. Otherwise, let's jump in to. I mean, where you'd like to go.
Well,
next.
let's talk about Facebook. I mean, as you said, Facebook is not known for its end user hardware, and as much as Facebook has been facing the music on privacy and whether they leak certain data, if you saw the demo of this new Facebook Portal and Portal Plus, it's really cool. I really, on just from a design standpoint, putting aside a lot of the, whether they can keep things private or creepy factor, it's just a really beautiful product and really well thought out. So this is two products one called Portal and one called Portal Plus. The Portal is kind of like a sideways tablet. It looks very similar to the Google Home Hub. It looks very similar to the Alexa version of this thing. So it's basically like a tablet held landscape-wise. And you can interact with it. You can do video conferencing. The other one that I think is really cool is the Portal Plus. So think of like a really big, almost like a 17-inch laptop screen turned to portrait like vertical orientation. And there's this big camera on the top, and you can do like video conferencing with folks. But the really neat thing about it is that as you walk around the room, it tries to listen to where you're coming from, and it kind of pans the camera digitally to follow you. So it's almost like having a mini camera person sitting on top of the tablet following you around, and the demos at least look really neat. And this is something that I think will be the standard thing in pretty much any kind of device in about 5 years. But to see Facebook do it now is pretty cool. This is kind of the ultimate, leave this behind at your grandparents' house and let it be the interface that you keep in touch with them with. And this is a pretty neat interface. So they basically have a super wide angle camera at the top, and then with a computer algorithm, they try to track where you are in the video stream, and then they kind of zoom in and pan around almost like a professional camera person on this thing. But from all accounts, Facebook, this is kind of a one or two trick pony, whereas you can kind of think that Google will allow for folks to have different apps and things that take advantage of this. I'm not sure Facebook is ready to open up its whole universe to other folks. So this looks like it's kind of like a Facebook Messenger on steroids, but I'm not sure how much beyond that it's going to be.
I got to say, Andrew, I'm pleasantly surprised to hear you say, praise the design and the potential of this. Of course, keeping in mind the creepy factor and everything else.
Exactly.
So, I think that's interesting. Let's see if anyone has a question about the Facebook product, and if they don't, Suman has a comment about Alexa Business.
Yeah, I'll wait for people. Does anybody have any questions for the earlier talk? Okay,
nope,
so
go ahead.
all right. So Alexa can now reserve conference rooms. So they're actually increasing the business side of the Alexa features. Amazon is debuting a new feature that will allow businesses to use it to book conference rooms. And this is, I think they have a feature before where it could work with Microsoft Exchange or Google, but they're expanding the features and making the Alexa for Business platform bigger than ever.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's a great point. I think the applications, and some of us who use Facebook knows that Facebook's been trying to push a business Facebook product kind of unsuccessfully, but something like the Portal Plus would be great for putting it at the end of a conference table in a business environment so that you can have that.
Yeah. They spoke about integration with Microsoft, Splunk, and other productivity tools. So that's great. I mean, they want to get into that. They're actually, I believe they can also they're trying to use it for hotel rooms also, booking hotel rooms. So a lot of possibilities there for Alexa.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so the two devices from Facebook are pretty reasonable in terms of price. The 10-inch smaller one is $199, and the bigger one, which is 15-inch, I said 17, but it's actually 15, that can go vertical, is $349, which is not terrible, but they're kind of specialized devices, so you're paying $349 for a capability that's primarily inside of Facebook. So people are going to have to figure out whether that's worth it or not. But it's a really well-designed device if you can kind of trust Facebook to do right by your privacy. So that's a big if.
Yeah, that's a big if at the moment. All right, we have about 15 minutes left, and we've got a couple of more big topics to go through.
So we've gone through Google, Facebook, Amazon, and then Apple. Well, so the big announcement, which is a few weeks old by now, which is Apple's new handhelds, or handheld devices. So the iPhone XS, XS Max. I love how people are kind of making fun of this iPhone XS Max name by just calling it the iPhone Tennis Match. It's like the easiest way to remember how to say it. So it's not XS, it's Tennis Match, or Tennis Match. I love Tennis Match. Okay. So the iPhone Tennis Match is the largest iPhone ever made by Apple. It is an incremental upgrade. It still has the notch at the top, but it's a really nice phone, and people are praising the picture quality. Folks still think that the Pixel, like if you're really into photography, and I forgot to mention this, but the Pixel 3 from Google now has Annie Leibovitz as an ambassador. So Annie Leibovitz, the famous portrait photographer, is like going around the US now doing portraits and pictures with just the Google Pixel 3, which is kind of fascinating as a marketing move. But, the iPhone Tennis Match and the Pixel 3 XL are kind of the two top-of-the-line phones now that people are looking at. And what's curious is that, Apple hasn't made a lot of news about what it plans to do with their Home Hub stuff. They do have a speaker system that has Siri built in, but almost everyone who uses it thinks that the Siri implementation, their voice assistant, is pretty substandard compared to Google and Amazon. So they're kind of rarely a distant third, but they're a distant third in this area. And then the big question people have is, what about Apple TV? What about this, Air charger thing that they had? They had promised this pad to charge your iPhone and your AirPods and your watch at the same time, and that's just went missing in this announcement. So yeah, Apple has made some pretty good moves in the handheld side, but the Apple Watch they announced was kind of interesting, like the version 4 of the Apple Watch. But the most interesting thing about the Apple Watch was that it was a health monitor, right? That it could help detect when someone fell down and you needed help, or it could monitor your heart and tell people if there's something really scary with your EKG reading on your body. But I kind of, this is kind of more editorializing, but this is kind of an odd turn for Apple. Apple's always been about positivity and creativity and what you can realize about yourself. And this is kind of taking a darker turn, which is kind of odd. It's thinking about death, thinking about safety. It's thinking about your personal health. And it's kind of an odd thing. It's not delighting people. It's kind of like saying, eat your vegetables. I'm going to prevent you from dying. This is a very different turn for Apple. And it's not a bad turn necessarily, but it's a different turn in terms of marketing. So I find that kind of a curious way for Apple to go in this area.
I wonder if that's because the folks who grew up on Apple products are now old enough to worry about mortality and then themselves falling or their parents falling and things like that. And we should remind folks that when you and I got started 25 years ago, having an Apple device was not common, and
right.
You had to be really out there to have an Apple device, and there were, of course, laptops and desktops that they made, but it was really the advent of these portable devices, starting with the iPod, that brought Apple back and Steve Jobs back and all of that. I remember that in our new media workshop that we taught at Columbia, the symbol of the class was a little bomb icon because our Apple computers would die so often and had to be rebooted. It was the equivalent of the kind of blue screen of death. But the way so many people now use Apple devices in their lives, even though they might be PC people at heart, is testament to the value of these kind of gateway products that get you in and get you into the computer system, and that's why all these companies are doing it, right?
Right, and actually, I forgot to mention one of the most important things about the Pixel 3 sree, and this is something that just begs for you to actually have this as your second phone, is they have a wide-angle selfie mode on the Pixel 3, and if you've seen the demos, it is like your dream come true. Like, you're always trying to extend your arm further and further to get the selfie. This thing will capture like twice as many people from the same length as your arm than current phones. So it has this gigantic wide angle view for selfies. So Pixel 3, just for the selfie mode itself, probably worth it for you to get. But I think this is, this is definitely illustrating something that I noticed a few years ago, and I said this on several podcasts back then, that the innovations are going to be much slower now in the domain of hardware, right? Because we now have perfect CD quality audio, we have super high-res pictures, we have 4K video. Now what are we going to do? Like, we kind of maxed out our eyes and ears in terms of resolution. Now what are we doing? So we're doing wide-angle selfies, we're doing shake reduction, we're trying to do, stacking the focus, taking 20 pictures and finding the best one. So these are the ways we're innovating now. It's no longer going to be the megapixel race or larger storage or more battery and things like that. We've kind of come up with a pretty good pattern for those things. Now the innovation is going to be harder. It's the AI era. If you see things like from Amy Webb, or if you trying to come up with smarter ways of shooting video and photos. So the innovations are going to be harder. They're going to be interesting, no doubt. But 3D and stereo stuff, or stereo vision, really has not taken off that much. We're trying to grasp for that next innovation, and there's going to be a lot of small innovations in a wide range of areas. It's not going to be one big innovation that's going to dominate the landscape, I think.
And what does that mean for folks who are listening in terms of where to put their dollars, but also where to put their attention?
Right. That's a good point. I mean, I think this is going back to what we always say all the time, is the storytelling never gets old, right? The storytelling is where where things matter, right? So it's kind of, it's more specific than content is king, but the ability to keep people engaged with a narrative and a story is more important than ever. So whatever tools you have at your disposal to get people there and to keep them engaged, the better, right? So I think that's something that is the lesson here, is that the storytelling tools, no matter what they are, whether they're Snapchat or Facebook or Twitter, you've got to be on top of them. And this is something that, the mobiles are going to be the key to all this. I think we still have, at the heart of all this, the handheld screen. Some people have said, oh, it's going to be all glasses in about 5 years, so the mobile screen is obsolete in 5 years. I don't think that's true. Not all of us want to look like we're wearing Google Glass. Not all of us want to put something on our face. It's going to be part of our future, but I still think for now, the handheld mobile device, with its higher resolution, with the ability to manipulate things much more easily than with voice command, is going to be the dominant landscape. And, at some of our, events that we've had, we're showing people how to use some of the better tools out there, like Adobe Spark, or how to do basic video editing on the mobile. More and more of those skills are going to be needed as we go forward, is, shooting something and editing it on your phone within 10 minutes and uploading it in a high quality format.
Certainly where we want people to continue to emphasize their work, especially in the creative industries. If you're a company that's looking to equip your teams, how do you decide whether you buy one of these new, and the Pixel products or just any of the Android ones versus iPhone? How do you look at that?
Right. Yeah, I think for most digital professionals, we said this at our last, smarter mobile session. I think most people should consider carrying both types of phones at all times. I'm primarily an iPhone user, but there are things where Android is much better because that's the Google first platform, right? Google pays attention to Android more. On the other hand, there are some products that are iPhone only as well. So it doesn't have to be an expensive phone. So I carry around a Samsung Galaxy S7. That's 2 generations old now. But as I mentioned before, the innovations in hardware are not happening so fast. So a $200 Android second phone is very, very reasonable these days. So Samsung Galaxy S7's got a great camera on it. It runs all the Google apps. So I find that having both phones, I know it's kind of a headache because you need to now learn a second system. You got to keep software updated on 2 different systems. But if you're doing client work or you're just trying to keep in touch with what's going on out there, having a second phone is not very expensive. You don't have to buy a second cell phone plan. You just kind of tether it or just use Wi-Fi. It's great to just make sure you're in touch with all the trends that are happening on both platforms out there.
I know you've been on my case to get that second phone, so I'm in the market for one, and I'll see when I can do that. Let's pause here for a minute and see if anyone has any questions. The people who are listening. Otherwise, I'll give you a chance to give us some closing thoughts. So let's just give it another second to see if anyone has a question. And if not, then let's go to your closing thoughts, Andrew.
Yeah, I think, what's really fascinating to me is how these four companies dominate so much of what is going on now. And it brings me back to this video that was made, I want to say, maybe 15 years ago now, by Matt Thompson. It was a kind of a thought experiment that he had when he was a fellow. Epic 2004. So this is made in 2004. How many years ago is that? 14, 15 years ago now?
Yeah.
Wow. So this is done by Robin Sloan and Matt Thompson. So Matt Thompson now is like the executive editor at The Atlantic. Super smart guy. But he was in the news industry for many years. He had a fellowship. And he basically said, you know what, for my fellowship, I want to make this movie that says, what will the future look like? So he made it in 2004 to predict what 2014 would look like. And he predicted that there'd be so much consolidation in the industry that there would be just one firm left in the end. And this would be called Google's On. It would be like when Google and Amazon merge. And what's funny is that in 2018, that's not too far off from where we are now. We have Google, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook as the big four right now. So what's fascinating is that, back then he didn't say that Blogger or MySpace or whatever would dominate. He said Google and Amazon would be the two biggies. And he was right, which is really fascinating. So to see these four have such an interesting hold, not necessarily in a bad way, but kind of a hold on our attention, whether it is Google and Facebook, where we never really give much money to these folks, right? So the classic case of, if you're paying nothing, you're the product. Well, we're the product of Facebook and Google right now. And then the places where we do spend money, like Amazon and Apple, right? We give them money maybe on a weekly or monthly basis. They have a different approach, but they still are very, very large on the landscape in terms of trying to give us customized experiences. So I think that having these four, being the ones who drive the innovation and the digital content that we're seeing is really fascinating.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, if you were buying a laptop today, what would you look at and how would you decide?
Yeah, it's always a toughie. It depends on whether you're doing any kind of high-end work with like images or video editing and stuff like that. I mean, I still think that, and depends on whose money you're spending. Is it yours or your employer's, right? If you can spend your employer's money, I think Apple's still the way to go because you have the most options for video editing, and you can run Adobe Suite, you can run Final Cut, stuff like that. But honestly, for most people, if you're spending your own money, if you're a freelancer or something, there's more bang for your buck with a Windows-style laptop. For like $700 to $1,000, you can get a super powerful laptop that can do everything versus having to spend like $2,000 to $2,300 for an Apple. So that's the thing, that most people these days as a digital creative are going to run like the Adobe Suite. And that is something that runs really nicely and fast on a $700 laptop for Windows. You cannot do that with Apple. Apple is pricey, and it is something that is going to drain your wallet if you are not careful. But if you're spending your employer's money, then that's less of a concern.
I would also say that when you're looking at these options, that really think about, I see way too many people with a PowerBook who, or I forget what they call it now. I've lost track of the Apples, names, but
MacBook,
MacBook Pro, where they think they're going to do high-end video editing, and they never touch anything except web surfing and email and all of that. So I think that's an important point, that if you're a creative person, you are in the creative space, you may need it. But I, for example, do all my work on my MacBook. Essentially, it's a MacBook Air type thing, and I don't even need that. I used for many years the Pixel Chromebook, which was basically just a browser and nothing else. And and I also do a lot more work on my phone than most people. So you have to decide where to go. If you had a nice Surface or the new Slate product from Google, and seeing if that and your phone are enough, or in your case, saying buy two phones. But the days where you need the highest end laptop, and I still see people spending that kind of money. If you're buying a Mac, the $1,100 one is much more useful for people than the $2,500 one.
Right.
But I still see people creeping towards that $2,000 level. So all of you who are listening should make your own decisions, of course, about these things, and find the right kind of the sweet spot for you. And there's a wonderful tweet I saw today. Quartz did a story that Jack Dorsey runs two multi-billion-dollar companies without a computer. He's running Square and Twitter. But then someone retweeted that and said, hold on, he has a phone, and a phone is a computer. And that's something that people forget, right? Your phone is a computer. So that's important. All right, so let's pause here for now and to see if anyone has a final question or comment. And if not, then we'll just say thank you to our Digimentors members. We love doing these briefings for you. If you have topics you'd like to suggest, please email us. And if you're not a Digimentors member and you're listening to a recording of this at some point, please check us out, digimentors.group, Group. And that's the first .group I've ever seen and the first one that I've ever been involved with. And digimentors.group. Our Twitter handles are @sree for me and @FUZHEADO for Andrew. And the easiest way to get both of us in one email is info@digimentors.group. And I'm Sree at sree.net, and he's Andrew at andrewlee.com. Thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you again on another Digimentors briefing.